back at 4 Eastern, 1 hour from now. Please join us then.
See you then.
I don't know why the Republicans are afraid of the truth. Every member should support allowing the American people to hear the facts for themselves. That is really what this vote is about. It's about the truth.
Madam Speaker, when you look through this resolution and you see how one-sided, how Soviet-style this is running, this is the United States of America. Don't run a sham process, a tainted process like this resolution ensures.
Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. A sharply divided House voted Thursday on a resolution to formalize the ground rules for its impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. The party line vote defining the procedures that lawmakers will follow as they transition from weeks of closed-door interviews to potentially public hearings and a possible future vote on articles of impeachment. Let's bring in Wall Street Journal columnist Kim Strassel, assistant editorial page editor James Freeman, and columnist Bill McGurn. So, Kim, let's kind of assess, what do you make of the vote this week, and did it advance the Democratic cause of impeachment?
Well, it's hard to say that it advanced it, because if you step back, this is the first time in modern American political history that you've had an entirely partisan vote to proceed with an impeachment inquiry. And if anything, you had 2 Democrats who crossed over to the Republican side to vote with them in opposition. So again, impeachment is a political process, and the goal here is to convince significant majorities of Americans that you are proceeding fairly, and that you have the goods, and it's not succeeding in that regard on the basis of this vote and polls we see out in the country.
Yeah, James, 410 to 4 in the Nixon impeachment inquiry vote. Both parties overwhelmingly for it. 31 Democrats voted for the inquiry, not ultimately impeachment, but the inquiry against Bill Clinton. This time, 0. I was surprised, I'll be honest with you, because I thought you'd get some Republicans who are retiring in next year, don't face any more competition politically, and they're not fond of President Trump. I thought more would be there.
Yeah, I think a setback for the cause of impeachment, and it makes me wonder whether Nancy Pelosi really believes in this, or whether she is essentially just pleasing the furthest left parts of her base, satisfying them to do this. Because if you were serious and you actually thought there was a case to be made here, I think what you would first do if you were Nancy Pelosi is try to get some of those Republicans on board by negotiating, saying, okay, no more closed hearings. Okay, we'll allow Republicans to call witnesses without our approval. Basically, bringing it back to the traditional Nixon or Clinton process in an effort to make it bipartisan. I don't know if she tried to do that and found no takers, but this is not a strong message for her side.
The other thing I would say, Bill, is if you really want this to persuade the public, Adam Schiff is not your best spokesman, and I say that in a purely analytical sense. I mean, he knows he wrote an op-ed for us calling for impeachment probably in 2017.
He had seen more than circumstantial information on Russian collusion that somehow eluded Bob Mueller and his team of attorneys, right?
So what does this mean, though, that she's saying Schiff is going to be able to continue? He's going to be able to hold private, secret hearings if he wants. He's not obliged to turn over any of the transcripts of the witnesses he's already interviewed. And in the end, the only thing he really has to make public is a final report whose contents he will decide.
And remember, it's unusual to have the Intel Committee heading an impeachment, right? So it's not just that they've chosen him, they've gone, again, outside of precedent to do this. Look, your point before about Republicans joining this, I think if they had had a real inquiry vote, the kind of traditional vote we had, they might have got a few, because a lot of Republicans could say, I'm not saying we should impeach, but we should look into it. Mrs. Pelosi talks about the truth, but the process is the way you get to the truth, right? You don't just go by opening statements.
Well, but this is what they say. They say process, schmocess, who cares? But only the substance matters.
Well, first of all, process is a fundamental part of the law of justice and so forth. I mean, in some cases more important than outcome. Second, process is how you get to the truth. You don't just take an opening statement or some little nugget Adam Schiff has leaked. You want to hear how a witness handles cross-examination and so forth. Mrs. Pelosi had two problems. She could have had an honest impeachment inquiry and probably got a few Republican votes if she had done it in a kosher way. But then I'm not sure they would have gotten enough to hang Trump. So she chose the other way because she wants an impeachment. Having committed to that vote, I think she's committed to actually impeaching the president.
You know, Kim, the biggest rule difference between the Nixon and Clinton inquiries and this one, in my mind, are the fact that in this one, the Republicans can ask for a witness, but they're subject to veto by Adam Schiff or Jerry Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee. In those other impeachment inquiries, both parties, majority and minority, had equal power to call witnesses.
Yeah, another big difference, too, is that even in the early proceedings in those prior impeachments, the president's counsel was allowed to be present and privy part of the proceedings. That's also different. This entire continuing early stage that Adam Schiff is doing, the White House still is not allowed to take part. And look, this really was a mistake of all of this because it is allowed. The Republicans are now have a very legitimate point that if you're going to cook this up this way from the beginning, then it's all a bit poisoned and tainted, and that's going to have repercussions for the coming vote on impeachment and for how the Senate may handle this as well, too.
This is what puzzles me, James. So I think Kim makes a good point. It made it easier for Republicans. So how does this serve the cause of persuading the country to oust Donald Trump?
I don't think it does. I don't think it's persuasive.
But then why do
at all? But I think this is a question you'd love to get Nancy Pelosi under oath to answer. Why is she really doing this? I think if you're maybe an optimistic Democrat, you can't really think he's going to get convicted in the Senate. So you're thinking, okay, we're going to tag him with impeachment, and then we're going to run against him next year, talking about how he's been disgraced and impeached. But of course, when this process ends up going nowhere, he will claim vindication, and I think rightly so. But I'd like to emphasize, we've been talking about the bogus process. What it's trying to do is prevent information, evidence that supports the president from coming out. They do not want Hunter Biden to be under oath answering questions.
Still ahead as the House moves ahead with its impeachment inquiry. All eyes also on the Senate, where liberal groups are already targeting some vulnerable Republicans. Karl Rove on the politics of impeachment heading into 2020. As the House votes on its impeachment resolution, one Democratic group has its sights set on the Senate. The super PAC Need to Impeach released a new ad this week pushing 4 Republican senators to vote to remove President Trump in an eventual impeachment trial. The $3.5 million campaign is targeting Susan Collins of Maine, Joni Ernst of Iowa, Cory Gardner of Colorado, and Martha McSally of Arizona, all of whom face tough re-election fights next year. Take a look.
Should a president pressure a foreign leader to intervene in our elections?
I could have. I think it would probably, possibly have been okay if I did.
He swore an oath to protect our democracy, but ask his lawyer.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
Now his chief of staff says,
Get over it.
tell Senator Collins it's time to put country over party.
Fox News contributor Karl Rove served as a senior advisor to President George W. Bush. So, Karl, I want to get to this ad in a bit. But first, how does the partisan nature of the House vote for an inquiry affect the politics of impeachment and the ability to persuade the country?
Well, look, one of the 3 big considerations that I think voters are going to have when they ultimately judge members of the Senate and House for voting on this is, do they believe the process was bipartisan in nature? That was the critical element in both the Nixon impeachment and because it was missing in